The air was thick with the scent of diesel and the distant hum of military drills. Camp Pendleton buzzed with its usual energy. Men in uniform shouting commands, armored vehicles rolling past, the sun burning down on the dusty Californian ground. It was another ordinary day for the Marines stationed there. But for one man, Sergeant David Ross, that day would be burned into his memory forever, not because of war or orders, but because of a woman he never saw coming. David had seen it all: combat tours in Afghanistan, missions that blurred the line between courage and madness, and losses that still haunted his sleep. He was the kind of Marine who walked with a quiet arrogance, a survivor who carried his scars like medals. He believed he could read people instantly, so when he saw her, just a woman in plain clothes, standing quietly by the aircraft hangar, he thought she was out of place. Maybe a civilian lost on base or one of those journalists who always asked the wrong questions. She wasn't tall, nor did she look particularly intimidating. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, her clothes modest, her posture calm. Yet there was something about her eyes, sharp, watchful, and unsettlingly calm, like someone who had seen storms far worse than the one ahead. David, with his trademark smirk, walked up to her. "You lost, ma'am? This isn't exactly a tourist spot." She gave a faint smile but said nothing. He chuckled, trying to lighten the moment. "All right then, since you're here, what's your call sign?" It was a playful jab, the kind Marines threw at each other all the time. He expected her to laugh it off, maybe roll her eyes. But instead she looked at him straight into his soul and said two words that made his smile fade in an instant. Black Mamba. The hangar went silent in David's mind. That name wasn't just a nickname. It was a legend, whispered across Marine and Navy units for years. Black Mamba was the code name of a pilot who had flown classified missions during the darkest days of the Syrian conflict. She'd flown into no-fly zones, rescued trapped units, and taken on impossible odds. Entire squadrons owed their lives to her. The legend went that she disappeared after a final mission that left her fighter in flames over hostile territory. Everyone thought she died. No one had ever met her. Until now. David felt his breath catch in his throat. "You're kidding," he managed, but the look in her eyes told him she wasn't. That calm, razor-sharp stillness. That was the gaze of someone who'd faced death and learned to dance with it. The woman, her real name Captain Elena Parker, nodded once and walked past him toward the hangar. There, under the tarp, was an old FA-18 Hornet with faded paint and burn scars on its wings. She ran her hand along the edge of the cockpit as if greeting an old friend. David watched, speechless. The other Marines nearby began to whisper. Some had heard the stories, others didn't believe them. But as the sun hit her dog tags, the inscription became visible. Elena Parker, USF, Black Mamba. The silence deepened. Elena had returned to base for one reason: to say goodbye. Years ago, she had been forced to eject over enemy territory. She survived, but her co-pilot, her brother Lieutenant Aaron Parker, did not. She had searched for him for days before rescue teams pulled her from the wreckage. Since then, she'd left active duty, disappearing into civilian life, haunted by the sound of his last transmission. That day, standing before the aircraft they once flew together, she wasn't a hero. She was a sister mourning a ghost. David couldn't help but feel the weight of her silence. Later that evening, he found her sitting by the edge of the runway, the sunset bleeding orange over the distant ocean. The base had quieted down. Her gaze was locked on the horizon where the sky met the sea, the same view her brother had loved. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "You know, when you're up there, the sky feels endless. You think you can outrun the memories, but they find you, even at 30,000 feet. David listened, feeling something stir inside him. He'd lost friends too, men he called brothers, gone in the blink of an explosion. But the way she spoke, the pain buried beneath her steady tone, it was something deeper. As the days passed, word spread across the base. Some Marines began visiting her quietly, asking for advice, guidance, or simply to thank her. She never talked about her missions, never bragged, but her presence alone changed something in them. She reminded them that bravery wasn't just pulling a trigger or taking a hill. It was surviving the aftermath, carrying the memories and still choosing to stand tall. David found himself drawn to her strength. One evening, he found her again by the aircraft, polishing the old fighter's nose cone. "You could have told me who you were," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, not looking up. Would it have changed anything? He hesitated. Yeah, he said. I wouldn't have joked. She finally looked at him, her eyes soft. That's exactly why I didn't. A week later, the base held a small ceremony to honor fallen pilots. Elena stood in the back, silent. When they read out the name Lieutenant Aaron Parker, her hand trembled, but she didn't move. David noticed the tears she quickly brushed away. After the ceremony, she walked to the memorial wall and placed her brother's old patch, Black Mamba, beneath his name. As she turned to leave, David approached her. Where will you go now? She looked up at the sky, the faint trace of a jet stream cutting through the clouds. Wherever the wind takes me, she whispered. But I'll always come back when they call. Months later, a new mission arose, a humanitarian operation in a disaster zone. The Air Force needed a pilot experienced enough to navigate unpredictable conditions. When the command asked for volunteers, one name appeared on the list that made everyone double take. Captain Elena Parker, call sign, Black Mamba. When her fighter took off at dawn, the same Marines who once joked about her stood at attention, saluting the rising silhouette against the fiery horizon. David watched her jet vanish into the light, knowing he'd just witnessed something extraordinary. Not the return of a legend, but the rebirth of a soul that refused to stay broken. Elena Parker's story spread far beyond the base. Soldiers whispered it in the barracks, civilians shared it online, and pilots spoke her name with respect. She wasn't just a call sign anymore. She was a symbol, a reminder that even the strongest warriors carry invisible wounds. And sometimes the greatest battles are fought in silence. And somewhere, far above the clouds as her fighter sliced through the sky, she whispered to herself, "For you, Aaron." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Legends of History. Every story we tell keeps the spirit of courage and sacrifice alive. Special request. Tell us in the comments, what does courage mean to you?